Welcome back to a very special College Chaps podcast. Today we'll be talking to our third head coach of the season and someone who has transformed his programme in the first season in charge. But first with the College Chaps, and I'm joined by Ollie this afternoon. How are you, my friend?
Doing really well. Doing really well. We're in the heart of bowl season. I'm very excited by our guest today because anyone who listens to this podcast knows about my affection and affinity for the Mid American Conference. So we're very excited by the guest we've got on today. I'm very much looking forward to this.
This is one of the few times I don't roll my eyes when you start talking about Maction, to be perfectly honest. But you are correct. It is no exaggeration to say that our guest is a special teams guru. Prior to taking up his current position, he oversaw the highest ranked special teams unit at South Carolina. And before this, he's coached at a variety of schools, including but not limited to Memphis, Rice, Maryland, and Ball State. So this close to Christmas and in preparation for a Bahamas Bowl game against Liberty, we're truly privileged to spend time with the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, Coach Pete Lambo. Coach, hi, how are you?
Doing great, guys. Merry Christmas, and thanks for having me on.
It is entirely our pleasure, and yes, Merry Christmas. So I touched right at the start about the success of your program and you getting into the a bowl game and in particular the Bahamas bowl game, which sounds very nice to be playing in January, to be perfectly honest. But on a serious note, how important is a bowl game to the Bulls program?
Well, you'd like to think if you've tried to do all the right things in your first year and build a culture and treat people the right way and try to put a good foundation in place, you'd like to think the vibe would be the same whether you were 4-8 or 8-4, but that's just not reality, right? The fact that we were able to find a way to win some games and finish the season strong, it creates a lot of momentum. It creates a lot of positive energy around the program. It gets a lot of people on campus and in the community excited. Our alumni are excited. And naturally, human nature, what it is, it's just a little bit easier to try to get some things done and move the program forward. So we're very grateful to be in this spot. I'd like to think that all of that same stuff would, that same vibe would be the case if the season hadn't gone as well, but it certainly helps that it did, and it certainly helps that we've got a really cool bowl destination. It's not going to be an easy game for us. Liberty's a very talented team, very well coached team, but it's a great opportunity nonetheless, and we're excited about it.
George touched on the first year success, and it was a historical first season for you in charge at Buffalo. How do you go? Because this is a program that 8 wins this season hasn't had 8 wins since 2019. How do you go about taking over a program which is, I think a lot of Buffalo Bulls fans would say, has underperformed in recent seasons? How do you go about transforming that? What were some of your expectations coming into this job this year?
Sure. Well, I think every coach, every leader has got to be comfortable with themselves and authentic and real. And that's who I am. I don't try to be somebody else. I try to be the same guy every day. I try to be very consistent. I think a big part of leadership is listening to your constituents, in this case primarily the players, and trying to learn. There's no two universities that are the same. There's no two athletic departments that are the same. And I've been around enough. Fortunately, I've had 3 other stops as a head coach that have been really good experiences for me. And one thing I know is that when you go into a new place, you have to be adaptable because you may have a plan, but what you emphasize early on, what you can get done early on, and what you can't is going to be different from institution to institution. I would say the best thing we did was I sat down with 87 current players on the team, some of which literally started the first day of the spring semester the same day I did, and just got to know them, started to build relationships with them, particularly with the older guys, did a lot of listening to what they felt like was wrong and maybe why the program was underachieving. And then from there, we just worked at coming together and getting on the same page and building relationships. And I tried to bring in coaches that were willing to put the program first rather than put themselves first. And I think when players feel like they're being treated the right way, when they're being respected, when their time is being respected, when you're trying to put a schedule together that's going to be cohesive to their academic success as well as their football success, and everybody's on the same page from strength staff to sports med to equipment to assistant coaches to nutrition, all of those different elements, you've got a chance. And the biggest difference between now and when I was a head coach the last time is that you've got to do it all a lot faster now because 10 years ago when I was at Ball State, you could really look at it as a 3, 4, 5 year project. Now, with the turnover in rosters and the movement and the transfer portal and all of those elements now that you're dealing with in 2024, I think the same things are important. I wouldn't change what we do or how we do it. You just have to do it more quickly, and you have to be ready to almost hit the reset button every year because your roster could be very different in 2025 than it was in 2024.
You touched on there respecting players' times, and we're going to respect your time, Coach. If we do get the opportunity to talk a little bit later on, there are some players, individual players, I would like to speak about. But you mentioned there your time as a previous head coach at Ball State. It has been over 10 years since you were at the program, and a lot has changed in college football. But is there certain things about your time in the MAC? It's obviously not your first MACtion rodeo, that you've been able to harness as you come to Buffalo and embark on a MAC season, which it's a conference that's a little bit different to some of the others in the country because of the scheduling, midweek games, and the cold for a start. I don't think you ever have a warm game, right, in the MAC. So whether
Certainly not in
something,
November.
no, definitely not, not in Michigan either. Was there some things that you were able to harness from your time at Ball State as you came into the Buffalo Bulls?
Absolutely. I would say the first thing that hasn't changed about the conference is from top to bottom. Yes, there are some programs that have better tradition, and there are some programs that are perhaps slightly better resourced than others. But the difference from top to bottom is not as significant as it is in other conferences. When you look at athletic department budgets and football program budgets and some of those things, it's a lot closer from team 1 to team 12 than it would be maybe in the SEC or in the Big Ten. So that is still very similar to what it was my first go around. The second thing that I would say is you're absolutely right. Playing some of the midweek games later in the season, having gone through that before, you know how to approach your team with those changes in the schedule. You know what's coming. You know some of the nuances to it relative to their academics during the week and team travel and whatnot. So I think that was really helpful to fall back on that experience from my first time around. It's kind of like when Churchill got named First Lord of the Admiralty for the second time. He never forgot Gallipoli, and some of those experiences he had, I'm sure, were very good, and some probably scarred him for life, right? So I'm a little bit the same my second go around in the MAC.
I love the comparison to Churchill. It's fantastic. I touched a little bit at the start about your prowess as a special teams coordinator, right? And I think I'm somewhat underplaying it because you've been around special teams for a large part of your coaching career. And if you don't mind, I just take a step back to your time at South Carolina, where I think Shane Beamer still reaps the benefits of the time that you had there, because anyone who's watched South Carolina over the years, but again this year, has seen how special teams has become. What what makes a good special teams unit? And what are the keys to, getting to, because effectively when you, as I said before, when you're at South Carolina, you became the number one ranked special teams unit in the country. What's the keys to getting to that place?
Well, I think any program, any unit within the program, any business, to maximize the potential of the people, you've got to create buy-in, and and you got to get people excited to come to work every day. And special teams is not something that naturally people are going to gravitate towards unless maybe you're a punter or a kicker or a long snapper. The rest of those guys sitting in the room are saying, "Hey, I'm the outside linebacker. I'm not going to introduce myself as the right guard on the punt team, or I'm a wide receiver. I'm not going to introduce myself as the left gunner on punt or the five on the kickoff team." So, in order to build that culture, you've got to really have a plan to sell yourself and sell your units, your philosophy to the team. And that's why I think being a head coach prepared me well to be a special teams coordinator, and being a special teams coordinator prepared me well to go back and be a head coach, because you have to have relationships with every single person in the building, every single guy on the roster, even down to those assistant coaches. Because if you're the defensive ends coach at South Carolina, um, getting quarterback sacks is what's going to pay your bills at the end of the month, not coaching, the three and the four on the kickoff unit. But you've got to build a relationship with that guy and get him excited about coaching the three and the four on the kickoff unit, because you're going to need his help to have a successful kickoff unit. So my plan was really to, number one, really, really teach the fundamentals of the game, because I really believe that special teams is offense and defense with more time and space. And when the players understand that you're trying to make them a better running back, a better receiver, a better tight end, a better linebacker, a better corner, a better safety, they are more likely to say, okay, I really want to pay attention here. I really want to be a part of this, because it's also helping me at my primary position. Um, but on top of that, if they can see perhaps there's a future, and maybe I can get to the NFL a little bit easier if I've got a special teams portfolio. Um, I can help the team win more games if I'm able to make an impact on special teams. And then lastly, just creating an atmosphere where they're excited to come in that room every day. And for me, that was almost like a theatrical production for 20 minutes a day or 25 minutes a day. My PowerPoints would have a bunch of pop culture in it. We'd play music. We'd have different awards. I had nicknames for players. I would come in and I'd be, I'd get hot one day, and then I'd be, calmer the next day. And, I'd try to keep them on the edge of their seat like a good movie every day.
Yeah,
And just little things that they would end up looking forward to. Like for our punt return units, I would come up with different names for the returns, and they'd be different every week, but they'd tie into what we were trying to do. And so there was okay, uh, Britney Spears. All right, so Britney is a return this week, and Britney means something. The B and the R and the T, and it all means something. So now I'm
yeah.
thinking, okay, I know what Britney is, and I know why we're running Britney against Florida this week. And then, of course, I might have a pretty nice PowerPoint presentation with some really good pictures of Britney. So, you're trying to keep them interested and engaged, and a guy like Xavier Legette, truth be told, when we first got to South Carolina, we weren't even sure that guy would continue playing football. He was just, you saw the talent, but he wasn't passionate about it. And really, the way he started to get on the field for us initially was through special teams. And then He caught a big touchdown pass against Vanderbilt in 2021, and his stock started to go up a little bit as a receiver. But in 2022, it was really a lot of special teams, including a huge
Mhm.
kickoff return against Texas A&M that will probably go down as one of the great plays in South Carolina history that really put him on the map. And then the following year, of course, he had a breakout season at receiver, and now he's playing for the Panthers. So there's a lot of great stories. I'll always be grateful. Shane Beamer gave me a wonderful opportunity there, coming from his father's background teaching, the importance of special teams at Virginia Tech for 20 years. It really couldn't have been a better situation for me to have the support of the head coach and the time to do what I love to do.
You talk very passionately about your time at South Carolina. What was it like being part of Beamer Ball? Because it's a very exciting time to be down there in South Carolina, isn't it?
Yeah, there's nothing better than building a program and coming in with good people, inheriting some good guys, much like we did here at Buffalo, and then really seeing something special get built from the ground up. And, I had all intentions of being there this year. I didn't get this opportunity at Buffalo until very late. I think Bill O'Brien at BC and myself were the two last hires in the cycle last year. And so, in my mind, I was going to be back in Columbia for, who knows how long. We loved it there. Um, and really thought that this 2024 team was going to be our best team. Changing times and obviously the transfer portal and NIL has greatly affected college football. And I felt like at South Carolina in this past year, we finally got to a point where we were where we needed to be with a lot of that stuff and bringing in some really good players and addressing some needs at some critical positions. And then, of course, Linares Sellers, who had a breakout year at quarterback, really saw his potential. And all those specialists that I had for 3 years, with the exception of Mitch Jeter, who went to Notre Dame, were back. So Kai Kroger and Hunter Rogers, Alex Herrera, those are three really good specialists and good leaders in the building. And so those guys really have been a huge part of that special team success over the last few years. And, I'm glad those guys are going to a nice bowl game to wrap up their careers.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity to speak to Kai a couple of years ago about, and it just as you started talking about the meetings, then I remembered him talking about those meetings that he had with you, and he spoke very fondly about his time with you as his special teams head coach. You talked about NIL and the transfer portal then, and when we first started talking, it was in the midst of kind of the first trench of the transfer portal, and we said, "Oh, we'll catch up once that kind of first flurry of the transfer ball is gone." I had a couple of questions about the changing face of college football for you, coach. So, firstly, how NIL impacts a program like Buffalo, and just how difficult roster management as a head coach has become with those changes to NIL, the transfer portal, even compared to your time when you were at Ball State.
Yeah. So when I was at Ball State, this is how much things have changed in 10 years. The first step was when they allowed graduate students to transfer and be immediately eligible, which I thought was wonderful. We had two players come from Notre Dame that, were down the depth chart at Notre Dame, came to Ball State, got master's degrees, and played for us. And that was just wonderful. Other than that, really the only transferring that you saw was guys that moved down from the FBS to the FCS, and usually that was just to get an opportunity to play more. Um, the transfer portal, in and of itself, I think, is a wonderful idea because it makes everything very transparent when a guy wants to switch schools. The big change to me was when they eliminated the year in residency, where, in other words, you had to sit out for a year if you wanted to stay at the same level of college football or go up. That was the game changer because now you have, a player at South Carolina who could theoretically transfer to Clemson and be eligible right away and literally be playing on the other sideline the very next season. That to me was the game changer. And then you throw the NIL on top of it, which basically brought us to a point where it's no longer amateur football anymore. It's a mini pro football at the college level now. That greatly affected it. So you look back to some of those players we had at Ball State. Juwan Edwards is still the all-time leading rusher at Ball State, and Keith Wenning is either the or one of the leading passers, and Willie Snead is one of the all-time great receivers. So guys like that were playing for us at Ball State back in 2011 and 12 and 13 and 14, it would have been hard to keep those guys around because they would have been very sought after players in this day and age. And I don't think there's any way, even with some modest resources that we would have been able to keep them. So I think that's the challenge. Sometimes you have a guy who might love the program he's in, love the coaching, but have an opportunity to go earn some money that even if he doesn't make the NFL, because let's face it, the NFL rosters aren't changing. There's still going to be 53 players on those teams. But if a guy has a chance to go play his last year of college football somewhere else and make significant income doing it, that could be life-changing for somebody. We lost a player here after spring ball who went to a Power 4 program. And I'm 1,000% sure that they were recruiting him to be a backup. But they were willing to give him significant resources to be a backup. And, for that guy and the background he came from, that was hard to say no to.
You're going to be able to retain some talent this offseason and build on 2024 and the success that you had. What are your expectations? Obviously, you've still got one more game to play this year, but some of the expectations for what the program can achieve in 2025 and how excited are you about the future of Buffalo football?
Yeah, there's a lot of pluses to being in Buffalo, New York, and one of them is it's a great town. We've got a lot going on here, and when you look at some of the programs in the group of five, they might be in more remote locations, more isolated, further away from airports and things like that. Certainly when I was at Ball State, that was the case. Muncie's sort of about an hour northwest or northeast, I should say, of Indianapolis, and kind of hard to get to. We don't have that problem here at Buffalo. We have an airport 10 minutes from campus and direct flights from almost 30 different cities. So recruiting, bringing players in from Washington, D.C. or Charlotte or Atlanta or New York City or Philly or Boston, even other places, Florida, and it's very easy to get guys here. And then it's very easy for them to go home on a break, and then it's very easy for their parents to come to games. We've got a pretty good recruiting area to drive to as well in Western Pennsylvania and Northeast Ohio and over into Michigan. You can cut across Canada and be in Detroit in about 4.5 hours. So we're in a good spot from that standpoint in terms of logistics. And then the last thing I would say, and this is probably the best kept secret in the continental United States, is that Buffalo is the 36th ranked public institution. And we need to do a better job marketing that. But our academics here, our admissions, our academics, the quality of the degree that a young man is going to get from UB is exceptional. And if you look at the U.S. News, World Report rankings and so forth, no offense to any other school in the MAC, because there are some very good institutions, but we are the highest ranked, relative to that list. 36 public and 76th overall. So if you want to study business or study communications or study any number of majors, engineering, exercise science, the list goes on, this is a great place to do it. And we've got excellent internship opportunities because Buffalo's a thriving city. Again, it's a lot of fun to go to school here because we've got great entertainment that comes in here and pro sports. Toronto's only about a 90-minute drive away. And again, you've got access to the airport. So there's a lot of good things here to take advantage of if you come here as a student athlete. And first and foremost, you're going to get a great degree.
I think in many ways you've already answered this question, Coach. We should put this at the top of the list. But I wanted to understand. You touched a bit, or quite a bit, about your time at South Carolina, and you've been at other schools in the South. And I think you come from the New York area. But I wanted to understand, what tempted you up to Buffalo? Why was Buffalo attractive, and where was the opportunity to get the best chicken wings in America on that list of reasons to go back to Buffalo?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer the second part of your question first. The food here in Buffalo is fabulous. I certainly haven't lost any weight since I got here. Everybody's got their favorite wing spot. Everybody's got their favorite Italian spot. Everybody, even things like takeout Chinese food, everybody's got their favorite spot. And it is a wonderful ethnic food kind of town. A lot of mom and pop type restaurants. And really, it just depends on if you like your wings a little bit saucier. You might go to a place like Wing Nuts, which is about a mile from our campus. Our players love it there, and those wings happen to be very saucy. You might go a mile in the other direction to a little hole in the wall bar called Elmo's, where they serve more of a drier wing, more of a dry rub type wing. But even some of the best restaurants are going to serve wings around here as an appetizer. My favorite Italian spot's called Filetta's, and I will put their wings up against just about anybody. So, it's sort of like a rite of passage around here that you better serve really good wings, even if that's not your primary source. So, going back to the job, so a lot of things drew me to Buffalo. First of all, we are the easternmost school in the MAC. Now, UMass will be coming in next year, so that'll change. But geographically, the recruiting footprint for Buffalo, I believe, is very much in line with where I have spent probably 25 years of my career as a college coach, and that's the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, up and down the East Coast. When I was at South Carolina, I was recruiting the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic for the Gamecocks. So the recruiting footprint is basically one that I'm very comfortable with and know a lot of high school coaches and even guys that are potential transfers coming from originally from the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. I'd like to think, I've built a pretty good reputation in my many years, going into a lot of those places. We touched on familiarity with the Mid-American Conference, which was a big part of it for me. And then the other thing we touched on as well is the academic reputation of this school. And some coaches don't like working at high-end academic schools because there are some challenges associated with that. I've always embraced it. I did my undergrad at Georgetown. I coached in the Ivy League at Dartmouth. I spent 8 years at Lehigh in the Patriot League. Elon's a great school. I spent a year at Rice. So I've been around some high-end academics in my career and enjoy working with guys that want to get a great education as well as play a high level of football.
I believe they need some new goalposts at Lehigh this year as well. They went in the river at the end of the season.
That was really cool to see. It
feels like, we said this on Tuesday, we had Laura Rutledge on the show on Tuesday, and we said it feels like goalposts have gone in the river at almost every college football program this year.
Yeah, there's been a lot of field storming and flag planting and goalposts coming down. It seems like anything that'll get a lot of views on social media nowadays is bound to happen. What would Churchill have done with social media? He actually would have embraced it, I think, because of course, his speeches were so incredible, and he definitely had a flair for the camera. when the cameras were on him. As much as he was a great leader, and no great leader doesn't have their faults. People don't hesitate to criticize some of his policies regarding trying to keep the empire alive and things of that nature. But he definitely knew how to embrace the camera to inspire people, and I think that's the positive part of social media, is that you can try to further your culture and share your vision, and do it a little bit easier with your constituents. But it's also kind of crazy that I'm going to paraphrase the quote, but he talked about how something could go around the globe, a lie could get around the globe so quickly, and or I'm way off base, but you could look it up. But that can literally happen in a matter of seconds now. Somebody can say whatever they want, with no backing, no facts to it, and people are going to read it and say, "Oh, that must be true because I saw it on Twitter."
I don't think you're wrong in anything that you just said there, Coach. Just to finish up the time, because I'm conscious of the time that we've got with you, I wanted to talk about Sean Dolak, because what a great advertisement for Buffalo football that guy has
Agreed.
been this year. Just talk to me a little bit about what he's meant to the program, for you as a head coach, being able to work with a guy that has set the standard for Buffalo football. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, he's an incredible human being. He's an 11 out of 10 type of guy. And when his football career is over, he's not going to have any trouble finding a great job, because he will do the same things for some company that he was able to do for our program. And that is bring his very best every day and elevate people around him, because he's so inspirational, both by example and when he speaks, it's very meaningful stuff. Yeah, it's interesting how things go. There was a big exodus here last December. He was part of that, but he had a lot of very close relationships with guys on the team and people in the athletic department, and I think his heart never left Buffalo. And when the transfer portal opened back up in May, he decided to come back. The way he handled himself last summer was impeccable, very humble, very modest, knew he had to earn people's trust all over again. But it was very clear by the time preseason camp started that this guy was going to be the alpha dog in the locker room, and he's lived up to it every week. He plays hurt, he plays inspired, he's incredibly well prepared, he overachieves in every way. He's passionate about the game. He's a just a great human being in terms of his values. He's very appreciative of people's support. He's close with his family. He's a great teammate. I mean, just the kind of guy you root for. And for the first time in program history, we have a consensus All-American. Even Khalil Mack was not able to do that. So, good things happen to good people. And, whether it's a long continued football career, or if it's just an opportunity to keep playing and then eventually moving on to the real world, Sean Dolak's going to be a rock star for the next many, many years to come. Now
Well,
we can, hey, let me cut you guys off for a second. We can talk about British rock stars too, if you'd like. We can talk about Eric Burdon and the Animals. We could talk about The Who. We could talk about Ray Davies and the Kinks. And I would just say that, of course, the Beatles, but everybody knows the Beatles. So I'd rather get into, Ginger Baker and Cream or something than the
Nice.
Beatles. But let me just say that Sean Dolak would be right up there with any of them.
well, this podcast is, in general, we've been doing this for 6 years, and the podcast never disappoints when we get a great guest on. But if you told me at the start of this podcast we were going to be talking about Churchillian speeches and the House of the Rising Sun, I would not have believed you, to be perfectly honest. Thank you, Coach. It's been awesome, really awesome speaking with you, and we wish you and your family a Merry Christmas. Do you, with the bowl game on the 4th, will you get a chance to enjoy yourself over the festive holidays?
Yeah, our players are off for a few days. They're coming back right after Christmas. Our staff as well. Of course, there's still a lot of recruiting going on, but we're going to lay a little bit lower here for a few days and then crank things back up after Christmas. So appreciate that, and same to you guys.
Thank you, and we wish you all the best in the Bahamas Bowl, and we're very jealous of the nice weather you're going to have over there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Coach.